Marcus Whitfield stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his ranch house, watching the storm tear across the Montana landscape like an angry beast. The wind howled through the valleys, bending the tall grass and rattling the sturdy oak trees that had stood sentinel on his property for over a century. Rain pelted against the glass in sheets, creating rivers that obscured his view of the sprawling 30,000-acre ranch that had made him one of the wealthiest men in the state. At 42, Marcus had inherited more than just land and cattle from his grandfather. He had inherited a legacy built on hard work, smart investments, and an unwavering commitment to the land. The Whitfield Ranch wasn't just a business. It was an empire that stretched as far as the eye could see, complete with state-of-the-art facilities, prize-winning livestock, and enough modern technology to run a small city. The storm had been raging for 3 hours now, and Marcus knew his foreman would be checking the perimeter fences and ensuring the livestock were secure. Power outages were common during weather like this, but the ranch operated on multiple backup systems. Solar panels, wind turbines, and diesel generators kept everything running smoothly, even when nature decided to flex her muscles. Marcus walked to his mahogany desk and picked up the satellite phone, one of several communication devices that kept him connected to the outside world despite his remote location. The nearest town was 40 miles away, and his closest neighbor lived 15 miles to the east. This isolation was exactly what he cherished about ranch life. Here, he could think clearly, make decisions without the noise of city life, and build something meaningful. The phone crackled to life as he contacted his foreman, Jake Morrison, a weathered man in his 50s who had worked the ranch for over 2 decades. "Jake, how are the eastern pastures holding up?" Marcus asked, his deep voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Most everything's secure, boss," Jake replied through the static. "But we've got a problem with the main communications cable that runs to the eastern gate. Lightning must have struck near the relay tower. We're losing connection to the security cameras and the electronic fence monitoring system in that sector." Marcus frowned. The eastern section of his ranch bordered public land and was the most vulnerable to trespassers, both human and animal. The electronic monitoring system was crucial for maintaining security and tracking the movement of his prized Black Angus cattle. Without it, he was essentially flying blind in that area. "Can it wait until morning?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. In ranch life, problems didn't wait for convenient times. "I wouldn't recommend it, sir. That system protects nearly 8,000 acres and some of our most valuable breeding stock. Plus, with this weather, we need to make sure none of the cattle have wandered off or gotten into trouble." Marcus set the phone down and returned to the window. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and darkness was beginning to settle over the landscape. He had built his fortune by being decisive and taking action when others hesitated. This situation was no different. "All right, Jake, get the repair truck ready. I'll meet you at the equipment barn in 20 minutes. "Boss, are you sure? This weather is pretty nasty, and the roads are getting muddy. We could wait until dawn." 20 minutes, Marcus repeated and ended the call. He changed from his wool slacks and dress shirt into work clothes, denim jeans, a heavy flannel shirt, waterproof boots, and a thick leather jacket that had served him well through many harsh Montana winters. Marcus had never been the type of wealthy man who stayed clean and comfortable while others did the dirty work. He had calloused hands and sun-weathered skin that told the story of a man who worked alongside his employees. The drive to the eastern section took 45 minutes through muddy ranch roads that would have challenged most vehicles. Marcus drove his heavy-duty pickup truck with the confidence of someone who had navigated these paths in every type of weather imaginable. Jake followed in the repair truck, loaded with cables, tools, and portable lighting equipment. The rain had turned the normally dusty roads into slick channels of mud, and the truck's headlights cut through the darkness like knives. Lightning flashed periodically, illuminating the vast landscape in stark, dramatic moments that reminded Marcus why he loved this wild country despite its challenges. As they approached the area where the cable was damaged, Marcus slowed the truck and squinted through the rain-soaked windshield. The relay tower stood about 200 yards from the main road, connected by a service path that was now more river than road. The tower itself was intact, but Marcus could see where the main cable had been severed, probably by a falling branch during a lightning strike. He was about to radio Jake when something caught his attention. Near the base of the tower, barely visible through the storm, was a figure hunched over what appeared to be equipment. Someone was already at the damaged site, working in conditions that most people would consider dangerous, if not impossible. Marcus grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight and stepped out into the storm, immediately feeling the full force of the wind and rain. The figure at the tower was smaller than he had expected, wearing a dark rain slicker and working with focused determination despite the terrible conditions. As he got closer, fighting against the wind with each step, Marcus realized with surprise that the person working on his damaged cable was a woman. Marcus approached cautiously, his boots squelching in the mud with each step. The beam of his flashlight revealed a woman in her early 30s, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that had managed to stay relatively dry under her hood. She was kneeling beside an open toolbox, working with professional precision on the severed cable despite the chaos of the storm around her. "Excuse me," Marcus called out over the howling wind, but she didn't seem to hear him. He moved closer, noting that she was using expensive equipment and working with the confident movements of someone who clearly knew what she was doing. When he was about 10 feet away, she finally looked up, and Marcus found himself staring into the most striking green eyes he had ever seen. For a moment, neither of them spoke, both seemingly surprised by the encounter. Rain dripped from her face, but she didn't seem bothered by the uncomfortable conditions. "This is private property," Marcus said, having to raise his voice to be heard over the storm. "What are you doing here?" The woman wiped her hands on a rag and stood up, revealing that she was taller than he had expected, probably around 5 feet 8 inches. Even in the poor lighting, Marcus could see that she was attractive in a natural, unpretentious way that was refreshing after years of dealing with women who seemed more interested in his bank account than his character. "I'm fixing your cable," she replied matter-of-factly, as if working on someone else's property during a dangerous storm was the most normal thing in the world. "Lightning strike knocked out the main line about 2 hours ago. I've been working on it since then." Marcus stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You're fixing my cable? Who are you? How did you even know it was damaged?" She gestured toward a modified pickup truck parked about 50 yards away that Marcus hadn't noticed in the darkness. The vehicle was equipped with various antennas and appeared to be some sort of mobile communications unit. "I work for Mountain Communication Services. We monitor the private network systems for several ranches in this area, including yours." "I've never heard of Mountain Communication Services," Marcus said, his natural suspicion kicking in. In his experience, people who showed up unannounced usually wanted something, and wealthy men like him were frequent targets for various schemes. Elena reached into her jacket and pulled out a laminated identification card and a work order, both of which she handed to Marcus. Even in the rain and poor lighting, he could see that everything appeared legitimate. The work order was signed by his property manager and dated 3 months ago. "Your property manager, Mr. Henderson, contracted us 6 months ago to provide emergency repair services for your communications infrastructure," Elena explained. "When our monitoring system detected the outage, I was dispatched immediately. The storm made it impossible to call ahead, and this kind of damage needs to be addressed quickly to prevent water infiltration and more extensive problems." Marcus handed back her credentials, feeling somewhat foolish. Henderson had mentioned hiring a new communication service company, but Marcus had been dealing with a major cattle purchase at the time and hadn't paid much attention to the details. He made a mental note to be more involved in such decisions in the future. "Why didn't you wait until the storm passed?" he asked, genuinely curious about this woman who seemed unafraid of working in dangerous conditions. Elena smiled for the first time, and Marcus noticed that she had a small scar on her left cheek that somehow made her face more interesting rather than detracting from her natural beauty. Storms don't wait for convenient times, and neither do emergencies. Besides, I've worked in worse conditions than this. Just as she said this, a particularly strong gust of wind nearly knocked both of them off balance. Marcus instinctively reached out to steady Elena, his hand briefly touching her arm. Even through her rain gear, he could feel the strength in her muscles, the kind that came from physical work rather than gymnasium exercises. "This is dangerous," Marcus said. "Why don't you come back to the house? You can finish this work tomorrow when the weather clears." Elena shook her head firmly. "I'm almost done. Maybe another 30 minutes of work, and your system will be fully operational again. I don't leave jobs half finished." Marcus found himself admiring her determination, even as he worried